when my assistant was preparing the itinerary, she said, you will certainly be better off going via Paris or London. I said, I am going to an African-Asian conference. I will not go to an African-Asia conference via Europe. What's the point? So let me first thank the University Gadjah Mada and the University of Queensland for this opportunity. This is my first time in Yogyakarta. I know Jakarta, of course. I know Bali, like everybody else. I know Bandung. I visited the museum. And I have worked very closely with Dewi Fortuna for 9 years in UNESCO in promoting social and human sciences in international fora. I met Professor Mohadi 3 years ago when I was teaching at Doshisha University in Kyoto, and he contributed to a book that I've edited with the proceedings of 2 international conferences on humanitarian intervention, responsibility to protect Asian perspectives. This is part of a series of regional conferences on the same topic. The next one will be on African perspectives, and hopefully we will be able to do that in the Middle East afterwards. So I run a young think tank aiming to influence policy in Africa and maybe on Africa on 3 issues. Africa New Global Partnerships, that's the first one, and that includes South-South, Africa, Asia, Africa, Latin America, Africa, Arab world, etc. Regional integration is the second one. And the third one is decentralization and democracy. Why imagine Africa? Imagination opens us to the possibilities to be invented and frees us from a past reality that can have a paralyzing effect on our action. Imagination allows us to move beyond customary ways of thinking and to use ideas to transcend the limits of the quote-unquote real world, to picture what is possible, and from there to reshape existing reality through research, advocacy, education, mobilization, and policymaking. Africa, the Africa that we are talking about in Imagine Africa Institute is not the black, quote-unquote, continent, the only continent, by the way, to which a color is assigned, but an Africa that goes from Cairo to the Seychelles, from Cape Verde Island to Djibouti, namely a multicultural Africa integrating Arabs and Bantus, Somalis and Afrikaners, Nilots and Indo-Pakistanis, Chinese, Malays, and Jews. An Africa whose contemporary cultural fabric would be the driving force behind social and economic transformation, leading to prosperity and social justice. Therefore, when we talk about partnership with other regions, we relate to geography, not to history. We look towards the future and not back to the past. We look on mutual interest and not against a third party. We look at Asia from Israel, Palestine to New Zealand. Let me now look at Bandung briefly before turning to the project we have been working on for some years now and called the Nairobi Compact, which is distributed. In 1955, what was the world like? Humanity had just emerged from the deadliest conflict of its tumultuous history. Nazi Germany's pursuit of its imperial ambitions clashed with those of the colonial giants, namely Britain and France. The criminal ideology of the hierarchy of races led to the attempt to eliminate the Jews and destroy Roma population, not to mention the German communists, because the wrong opinion making you lose your status as a member of the chosen race. And then the nuclear bomb. I visited Hiroshima, and I visited the museum in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where the testimonies of the survivors are recorded. And just try and imagine. First, an intense, huge flash that blinds you, a tremendous roaring sound, you become deaf, a crushing blast wave that blows you away, intense heat followed by a fire wind that burns you. Instantly, 100,000 people are killed. Supreme horror, supreme crime, supreme damage to humanity. So you have a war triggered by intense colonial competition, fueled by racism, and a demonstration of the will and ability to destroy humankind. This is 1945. Coming out of the ashes of 1945, the response of the international community was the UN Charter, the Fourth Freedom, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the civilian campaigns for disarmament. The whole world united to affirm never again. Countless young men from Asia and Africa were enlisted to fight the Nazi and the Japanese Imperial Army, and hundreds of thousands lost their lives for this never again, that is, no to colonialism, no to racism, no to war. But regrettably, the promises were broken. So let us look more closely at 1955, some of the events that took place in 1955, before the Bandung and after the Bandung Conference. On February 12, President Dwight Eisenhower sends the first US advisor to South Vietnam. On March the 2nd, Claudette Colvin, a 15-year-old African-American girl, refuses to give her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, to a white woman. She is taken to the police station. This is 9 months before the celebrated Rosa Parks. On the 9th of May, Germany joins NATO. On the 14th of May, the Warsaw Pact is signed. On July 13, Ruth Ellis, a woman, is hanged for murder in London. That will be the last woman to be hanged in London for murder. On 18th of August, the first Sudanese civil war begins, 1955. The war is still going on. On the 20th of August, hundreds of people are killed in anti-French rioting in Morocco and Algeria. Apartheid has already been conceptualized and put into practice already in 1948, the same year the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. So this is the context in which Bandung is taking place. In spite of the promises after the Second World War, colonialism is still vibrant, racism is still in existence, human rights violations are taking place, including the use of the death penalty, which is a violation of the right to life. So the president of the host country is prompted in his opening speech on 18 April 1955 to say we are living in a world of fear. Fear of the future, fear of the hydrogen bomb, fear of ideologies. Perhaps this fear is greater danger than the danger. You've heard that from Roosevelt already, because it is fear which drives men to act foolishly, to act thoughtlessly, to act dangerously. All of us are united by more important things than those that superficially divide us. We are united by a common detestation of colonialism in whatever form it appears. We are united by a common detestation of racialism, and we are united by a common determination to preserve and stabilize peace in the world. So in the eyes of Sukarno, therefore, the conference is responding to a global challenge, to a global agenda of peace, equality, and justice through the announcement of an Afro-Asian partnership, later the non-aligned movement. The conference did not launch a permanent African-Asian organization because it was not its purpose. And the final communique and declaration, focusing on world peace and nuclear disarmament, calls for, in its first article of the declaration, respect of fundamental human rights. Secondly, respect for the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, respect for the sovereignty of all nations, equality of all races and nations. So it is more a reiteration of the norms contained in the international instrument than specific norms set for a couple of regions. So the purpose of Bandung was to affirm the stand of newly decolonizing world and their adherence to the international principles set up in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is a group that is affirming its belonging to the international community and wants to be heard in an equal way with other parts of humanity. Bandung is not against anybody. Bandung is for humanity. 2005, Fast Tracking, 50 years, co-organized by Indonesia and South Africa, the 50th anniversary, hosts a summit of Africa and Asia and produces the new Asian-African Strategic Partnership. It has an interesting potential, working on specific areas such as counterterrorism, transatlantic crime, food, energy security, SMEs, tourism, gender, all under the common pursuit of sustainable development. And 2015, in a couple of weeks, Indonesia will host again a summit for the 60th years of the Bandung Declaration. And the documents, we are told, we have 3 outcome documents: the Bandung Message, reinvigorating the new Asia-Africa Strategic Partnership, and the support for Palestine. But still, the minister told us yesterday that there was still no organization and no mechanism of Asia-Africa cooperation coming from Bandung. And like I said, maybe it was not the objective of Bandung, and therefore we have to look at maybe other dynamics if we want to have a partnership between Africa and Asia. And this is why our institute has been doing research, advocacy, and consultations for the past 3 years to come up with a concept document which is still a draft for discussion towards the establishment of an Africa-Asia Forum on Sustainable Development. The partnership between Africa and Asia should not be taken for granted. It is not because we have shared a common history of colonial occupation that necessarily we can develop a harmonious partnership. We have seen already in Africa a certain reaction. For those who have followed developments in Africa, the Zambia, during the elections, you had a political party, clearly xenophobic, who wanted to kick out Chinese companies and Chinese residents. We've seen in Uganda also, that's 25 years ago, where Idi Amin kicked out the Indian community who had been residing in Uganda and who were Ugandan by nationality for 2-3 generations. So we should not take it for granted. For one, because sentiments like xenophobia are the best shared around the world. So it is not the preserve of one region or of a few countries. It exists everywhere. And you have to ensure that you work on it through education, but also to work on it by ensuring that whatever partnership you develop will be mutually beneficial. There is no point in developing a partnership if it is to repeat the excesses of the partnerships that existed before, like the one between Africa and Europe. So it has been said that the current cooperation between Africa and Asia is mainly of an economic nature and firmly illustrates the new trend of a South-South trade. However, it can be argued that at this stage, the partnership between the two regions is characterized by trade imbalances, geographical concentration, and one-sided initiative. There are serious challenges that common sharing of past injustices will not overcome. For Africa, it seems that Asia's trade and investment in Africa is not necessarily converted into growth and poverty elimination across the continent. The exchanges between the two regions are geographically concentrated, unbalanced in their nature, and follow the opposition industrial products versus primary products, making the partnership uneven. The consequences of the rapid increase in bilateral economic relations with Asia on African regional integration strategies and plans have not been assessed. The non-transparent nature of many deals in extractive industry, land sales risk to fuel corruption. Issues of counterfeit, fake products, including pharmaceutical, and the consequences of massive imports of cheap goods and sometimes labor on the African manufacturing industry are not addressed adequately by policymakers, even though they are endangering very fragile sectors. African policymakers and business communities do not cooperate closely enough when preparing negotiations with Asian countries. As a result, many agreements between two countries or the two regions remain non-implemented. Exchange of experiences and good practices in dealing with Africa is not taking place among Asian countries. The accelerating emulation by African countries of Asian economic models in political systems that are quite different may end up in disillusion and deceleration of the partnership between the two regions. As for democracy and human rights, the question is how to ensure that this fully positive momentum and movement is not lost when implementing an Afro-Asian partnership. How to insert in every agreement the necessity to commit oneself to respect democratic principles and human rights, the rule of law, and good governance. Concerning the environment, the question is how to attain environment-oriented policies and agreements between Africa and Asia, which would respect the states' rights, but also pave the way towards long-term shared respect for all environmental imperatives. Trade and economic development must be accompanied by the promotion of social justice, democracy, and the rule of law, the preservation of fundamental basic human rights and freedoms, the search for peace and stability, and ethical management of the environment. And therefore, that is why we are proposing a forum to African and Asian governments, but not just to governments, but also the private sector, the media, the scientific community, NGOs. The establishment of an Africa-Asia Permanent Forum for Sustainable Development appears as the best way to ensure a frank and all-inclusive dialogue among different stakeholders. Various fora already exist, and Bandung is one of them, but they do not fulfill the expectations of a joint venture on an equal footing. All existing fora are organized at the initiative of Asian countries, and being Asia-driven, they do not necessarily take into account Africa's priorities. With a view to balancing this situation, it is very important that initiatives come also from Africa. Secondly, most of these fora are held on an ad hoc basis, or at best 2-3 years intervals. What is considered here is that given the rapidity of exchanges between Africa and Asia, an annual edition would be much more relevant to support and influence the nature of the relations between the two regions. The existing fora are not inclusive, since they mainly invite either political leaders or business communities, or less often scholars. The planned forum includes all the stakeholders and therefore will be inclusive. The existing fora are not really encounters between two regions, as they often concern meetings between one single Asian country and the whole African continent. Therefore, we have the China-Africa Forum, the India-Africa Forum, the South Korea-Africa Forum, the Japan-Africa Forum. We had the Vietnam-Africa Forum. We had the Singapore-Africa Forum. Only the Maldives is missing. So we believe that it should be between the two regions and include all countries. And finally, all these fora are held in Asia, encouraging the Asian stakeholders to come to one place in Africa every year will have huge and fruitful impact on the relationship. 5 minutes. So the compact sought here, the forum is called the Nairobi Compact, using the paradigm of the Global Compact. We propose a forum to be an ethical framework, building on the United Nations Compact and emerging through exchanges of dialogue, enriched by an inclusive participation, and to be consolidated year after year. And the forum will accompany business communities in ensuring that investments, business opportunities, business relations are respectful of human rights, are respectful of labor rights, do not promote corruption, and are respectful of the environment, which is what sustainable development is all about. And we think that what is at stake here is that by proposing the establishment of a permanent forum is to make African and Asian stakeholders benefit from a fully reactive international think tank. Africa would be in a much better position to understand its Asian partners, their motives and methods, their specific approach, and we're able be able to act as a full partner around an ethical framework to be jointly developed. And Asia would thus be in a much better position to understand its African partners, their motives, their priorities, and would be able to act as a real value-added partner committed on the long term. I urge Indonesia to join us in this initiative, both at the government level, business level, scholars, NGOs, and the media. Like the Chinese say, we want to build a win-win partnership. And the win-win partnership is not just a matter of rhetoric, but it is a matter of measuring it on the balance sheet. Thank you very much.